Kia ora, Nihao, and hello. Welcome to the Chiwi Journal Podcast. I'm your host, Camellia Yang. My guest today is Angelo Alessio. He is the co-founder and protocol architect at buildcities.network, which allows anyone in Web3 to overlay their digital communities on top of existing cities. In today's episode, we talk about a startup city protocol, Build Cities, the network state, startup cities ecosystem, and many more. I hope you enjoy the show. When we met in real life in Lisbon, you just launch your project, like relaunch it, or how do you describe it? It's like, because it's already been there when I registered, but when we met each other in Lisbon, you did the public beta launch.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Was it? So we had, I'm kind of I'm not a huge believer in like launches. I'm more of kind of like, hey, let's build the staircase to the, to the moon. So I think it was probably, we've had several big announcements over the last several months, but the biggest one was we had, I think it's about a month after I visited Lisbon when I saw you, and we just launched our public beta in the beginning of October. So that was the result of 2 development cycles, one failed launch with a product that just I knew wasn't going to work. But now, since we launched the public beta about a month ago, we've had over 350 networks onboarded and across 50 of the different startup city chapters, or kind of like the beta city chapters. But all of this is still very phase 1. But yeah, we released it to the world about a month ago, and it's gone really well so far. So now we're just looking to, now we actually have something to measure in an iterative process towards building the staircase, so to speak.
So for my listeners who don't familiar with the Build Cities, can you explain it for even non-tech people can understand what you are building?
Yeah, sure. So the one-liner that we use is a protocol for startup cities, but I actually just did a great exercise the other day to kind of even condense that more. And it's really, we are creating infrastructure for digital communities to basically manifest their communities offline or in real life, so to speak. So almost kind of like translating those communities, the digital communities, from the cloud to the earth. I don't like the word meat space. I know some people use that in crypto, but just in the real world. So that means, and that infrastructure includes things like facilitating meetups, facilitating actual crowdfunding of ventures in real estate is something that we're looking at for phase 2. So it's really, the main thing is just bridging this connective tissue between all of these digital communities that we might be a part of, or at least our favorite ones. And when I'm talking about digital communities, what we're referring to technically right now is just Discord communities. So people will log in, they select their top 3, digital communities, digital Discord servers, basically, and then they overlay that on top of 3 cities that they are also, strongly affiliated with. So they get to choose. So if it's Lisbon, Hong Kong, and London or whatnot, then they're brought to a dashboard which you would be able to see, hey, here's all my folks in 1729 that are in London, the ones that are in Lisbon, the ones that are in Hong Kong. And you actually start to get like a geographical vantage point of your digital communities. And so we view that as kind of like the first wedge into introducing some of these future products. So we have a product that will essentially facilitate meetups of those communities, or cross collaborate between communities in those actual cities. And then, further down the road, the big ideal would be to actually crowdfund ventures and real estate in those given ecosystems, so that people have a shared space to collaborate, work on their projects, and see where the logical road of that goes. It could go into residential, it could go into more commercial route, but that's what we're kind of measuring day by day to kind of make those decisions.
Yeah, I think I mentioned to you when I moved to Lisbon, because I've already knew some Twitter friends online. It's kind of then we meet offline and we kind of want to co-found the co-working or co-living space together because we got along so well. But there's no specific place in Lisbon can facilitate our needs. So with your platform, I can use it to find more like-minded people from Discord. Then once I find them in my city, I can get connect, then do something together.
Exactly, and we'll make that infrastructure as seamless as possible so that, hey, let's say you're moving to Lisbon for a year or whatnot, or to crowdfund a potential lease in a given area, and that goes across community as well.
Yeah.
And what we've actually seen too is that sometimes it determines people, especially with like nomads, it kind of facilitates where they might be ending up next. So let's say we've seen some instances of, like, let's say user was like, hey, I'm looking to go to South America, right? Like, where should I go? Should I just pick a place on a map? Or they can see on our platform, oh, hey, here's so and so that I've talked to in this given Discord community, and they happen to live in Rio or Buenos Aires or whatnot. I might as well go. Like, we've had that relationship, I might as well go there. And so it kind of brings that context into focus a little bit more about geographical segmentation of our lives. Yeah, you can kind of start to like connect the dots. I think, like you mentioned before, like, you mentioned how you've met good friends from Twitter first, and then met them prior to maybe arriving in Lisbon, or I'm sure there's several places around the world where this has happened. And that, I think, that dynamic, we think, and I think, and maybe you think, or maybe you have a disagreement, but that's been very normalized post COVID. Like, before it was before it was primarily like a dating app that you would
True.
do that online to off, like, right, or like more, those kind of, yeah, that kind of stuff. But when it comes to, like, intellectual alignment, or just, yeah, platonic relationships or professional relationships, like the online to offline piece, where I don't think it was as large prior to COVID. I mean, it was there, but now it's just like,
Very
I
normal.
don't think people don't think twice about it. It's like, oh, cool.
Yeah.
In fact, like, a lot of the thesis out there, like the ideological alignment, I find to be pretty true. And I don't know, maybe, like, have you found that to be true as well? Like, the online to offline relationships, like finding that ideological alignment with people
Yeah.
easier.
Yeah, exactly. I wrote an article about 90% of my friends I met online.
Yeah,
Like I proactively find them, either read their content or listen to their podcast, and then I want to know them.
yeah,
For me, I move around a lot. So I feel like every time I move to a new place, I've already knew someone there because I know they're there. And when I move there, I can have a conversation with them. And now with your products, maybe we can do some investment or do some cool stuff together. That's pretty exciting.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And it's probably feels like you just picking up where you left off
Mm-hmm.
from those conversations, especially if you hadn't met the person before, online first, and then you meet offline. You're just like, oh, well, we don't need to do the get to know you. Like, let's pick up on the thing we were reading about, 3 weeks ago in this channel or whatever. So it's cool to see. And I think even before some of, like, the investment, some of the more like infrastructure, like investment pieces, there's still a lot of things that can be done that just facilitate that social interaction more. Like,
Yeah.
right now, Twitter and Discord, you just kind of do it manually, where you reach out, or sometimes people will put like the city channels in Discord, but you can only put so many city channels, and some people are living in more kind of Atlas Obscura type areas, and we want to have those. We want to have all of those, where you can definitely, there's still a lot to do on the social component first, and so that's what we're leading with, and then bringing in the financial aspects a little bit later.
Yeah, I see. You named your product Build Cities. So what does city mean to you? Why you don't see like build countries like what biology advocated.
Well, I think a city comes before a country, right? So,
Yeah.
or just even, and again, as Bob mentioned too, like a union comes before a city, right? Like
Mm.
every city started with its first brick. So it's kind of, based on I don't know if you've seen the Adrianople group, the three types of startup cities,
Ah,
but
yes, I heard
there's
about that. Yeah.
yeah, it's a good map. If you want to put the link out there or whatnot, like definitely check it out.
Yeah, I'll put in the show
Yeah, I think if
notes.
you just Google startup cities map, it's there. But anyways, so the three types, and I think they actually took the definition from biology. Maybe they was, they're collaborating or whatnot.
Oh,
But
okay.
so type one is ones that attract entrepreneurial activity or kind of activate it in their own ecosystems. So an example of type one would be like San Francisco, or New York, Miami, Austin, etc. And that's just U.S.
Yeah.
Lisbon is one. So yeah, they're all over. But type two are ones where the city acts like a startup itself. So they reference Miami, Dubai, Singapore. That one is kind of inherently political. So we don't spend too much time thinking about those. It's kind of I don't know what we can kind of kind of productize there. And then there's type three startup cities, which are cities that them themselves are startups. So I think cul-de-sac is referenced, Prospera in Honduras, and that's kind of the third type. And
Oh,
so for us, I think the prerequisite to all of those are type one startup cities. And one of the kind of just connecting the dots between these thought processes, there's a book by Brad Feld. He's one of the co-founders of Techstars. It's called Startup Communities. It basically outlines everything he did to make Boulder, Colorado, a startup ecosystem and activating the startup ecosystem and to make Boulder
yeah.
into what it is today. And so that's a type one startup city. Like he didn't call it that at the time, but he wrote this book, several years ago. And it's kind of like, okay, well, that's the playbook. So that's the kind of playbook we want to start with first, where, I think, again, the prerequisite to any of the more loftier ambitions just involves, first of all, a very innovative startup ecosystem where you have founders thinking about, different problems, starting their businesses. And then the more you kind of have around that, so those are the prerequisites that we think about for any of those three types of startup cities. Like in order to have a city that is itself its startup, you need to have people there who are founders, innovation minded, and because those are going to be the best possible audience or citizens of that potential community. So in a way, a lot of what we're kind of building out kind of like looks to productize this thesis of like, hey, you can start up, you can activate a startup ecosystem anywhere in the world. It can be on the longer tail of cities, and I think that's actually what's really exciting is like, you know we kind of view, and since a lot of what we're building is on crypto rails, it's kind of like this giant irrigation system of like talent and capital where you had the arteries going to like the main ecosystems, but now it's extended it out like the capillary glands going out to really much smaller ecosystems where you have brilliant people and can who are able to work on hard problems, and sometimes they just need the kind of connective, be able to connect the dots, get access to capital, et cetera, without having to like, no one should have to feel like they need to go to San
Mhm.
Francisco or go to a bigger ecosystem just to get their idea off the ground. And so if we can meet these founders in these ecosystems where they're at
Yeah.
and start to kind of activate them, that's exciting to us. And the platform we have, we can start to even like start to measure that,
Mm.
um, without, I mean, it's a digital product, so it doesn't cost anything to us for us to start measuring like, okay, this place is starting to get a lot of activity, let's kind of put more resources towards there. Yeah, so it starts with that social network we were talking about earlier.
I know there are 4 phases you talk about to achieve your mission. So can you elaborate which phases are you in now and what's your goal in
Yeah,
the future?
yeah. So I wrote in our latest newsletter, like we finally transitioned from the prologue just to chapter one,
Hmm.
right? Like the prologue was just
Cool.
ideation and theory and kind of figuring out, okay, what works, what doesn't. But now we're in chapter one, and I'll just call it phase one for now. In that we have the product that you can go to it today, buildcities.network, and log in with your Discord and MetaMask and see how it works. So everything we were kind of discussing earlier with like the social components, all kind of that's all kind of phase one. So like we have a feature that we'll release for making meetups, facilitating meetups a little bit easier with community members in different cities. We even have a mobile app
Oh, cool.
coming out right now. It's in
Yeah.
private beta, but and that's kind of tech agnostic. There's not really like a Web3 play there, but it's literally designed to basically like find people in your locality who have complementary
Hmm.
skill sets to build new projects together. So yeah, so those are kind of everything related
Yeah.
to phase one. Obviously growing our own community, and then phase two is the piece where we actually want to have community ownership of assets in the network. And so, and when I say ownership, I mean like full compliant, like people actually own a piece of the buildings that they're occupying. And so, you know, going back to the instance that we talked about in Lisbon, it's like, hey, let's
Hmm.
say crowdfunded a co-working space in Lisbon, ideally to purchase. Then that becomes one of the hubs in the
Yeah.
network, just as if, and then you would also have access to the hub. So like our first pilot hub is actually in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho.
Oh,
um,
okay. Yeah.
and I'll send you a link after this. Definitely, it would be great to include in the thing. But it
Sure.
literally kind of shows the blueprint of the ecosystems that we're
Oh,
trying to
yeah.
build. So where it started with community, and that started to actually, once the community is built, like the real estate gets activated. Like
Hmm.
it was an old building that just had not been used for like 10 years. And once the community was built, they were able to activate this real estate and have day one 100% occupancy and super high retention cohorts. And so yeah, so the more we kind of have in each city, those become kind of the semblance of this in real life manifestation, where if you're in Hong Kong or Lisbon or Coeur d'Alene or wherever, you'll have a place to meet not only
Mm.
your own communities that have high concentration in a certain area, but also kind of cross collaborate with other communities that are there, or build zone
Yeah.
community. We're more of an infrastructure play for existing communities, but yeah, so that's phase two. Phase three is just kind of doing that in scale. So it's kind of like, okay, so in Coeur d'Alene,
Oh,
they're going to be opening a third real estate property already. And so it's kind of like, hey, let's thread these together. Like, let's say we have a property here and there's a certain demand in an area to do maybe um, a co-living space. We could either
mhm.
partner with orgs like Cabin or Cohere, and figure out, hey, what makes sense where we can kind of be um, joint owners, or basically get
Yeah.
capital going into this ecosystem to buy out and purchase residential units, or having our own. So it's still a lot of gray area in that phase three, but that's what we call building cities, and that's literally just scaling up the process such that you have more real estate, you have more leverage, you have kind of a bigger community in each space.
Mhm.
And then phase four, I'll probably talk about the lease. It's build sovereignty, and that kind of plays in a little bit to the network state thesis. And while I definitely find it fascinating and interesting to consider, fully admit we
Yeah,
don't fully know what that path looks like, but it's interesting to think about, and I think it's a good North Star to get the community, all these communities thinking in that way, because I think it's definitely possible at some point in the future. Touching back on phase three, another interesting thing, like I think one thing that differentiates us from maybe a lot of
yeah,
similar adjacent projects in the space is like we're operating in existing cities already, but there's no reason why this infrastructure couldn't be such that somebody has private property and they give the GPS coordinates and they have a community that they can like start to bring into that area. It'll pop up on our map, and you can call it Cameliaville, and or whatever you want, if you have enough kind of people and capital going into that area, you could essentially launch your own city, which I think would be really cool, really fascinating. But we'll cross that bridge when we get
I
there.
see. Because when I use your product, I see you use the current city as one of your feature.
Yeah.
So when Balaji mentioned the start a new country, I was thinking like, oh, you should disrupt the current one and build something new. So what's your opinion on balance the current city landscape and build a new one?
Yeah, well, so when I started this, I hadn't really thought enough or read enough about special economic zones, but I know that seems to be a pretty substantial unlock for thinking about new cities and new economic primitives and just governance primitives, and literally building a new city. So that's an interesting bridge that I think when we get closer to will be interesting to explore. But I think why we're focusing on existing cities is because
Mm,
we do kind of I think we do kind of generally get more excited about these longer tail cities or longer tail kind of overlooked cities that don't have
yeah.
mature startup ecosystems there yet.
Hmm.
So I'm in Jersey City. My co-founders in Lagos, and our other co-founders in Coeur d'Alene, and all of those are kind of like nascent. Lagos is probably the biggest one by a long shot, like
Yeah.
as far as population startup activity, but there's still a lot of infrastructure there, capital access, a
Mhm.
whole series of challenges there that like could benefit from kind of a common platform to build those startup ecosystems a little bit more maturely. Um, so I just think there's so much white space with existing cities, and there's
Mm,
so many longer tail cities, and in a way it's kind of like if we're also looking at decentralization being like a geographical phenomenon, like I actually wrote an article about
mm,
this in 2018, like putting the venture into VC, which just talks about like you know literally all the just got all the information from CB Insights, all the data to just do like seed funding, and you could see where the concentration areas are. Obviously, New York, SF, but there's so many cities that are getting kind of these smaller amounts, and it's kind of like what if it was just more evenly distributed? And I think there's more and more data points suggesting that it's going to look more and more like this. There was the Twitter conversation or musing the other day about how Starlink is going to be repricing real estate, right? Now, with Starlink, you can be an entrepreneur and you can go literally to the middle of
yeah.
nowhere and start whatever it is you want to start, and so I think you're just going to see more and more of that, and I think we want to kind of it's definitely a tailwind. We want to make sure we have
Mhm.
the sales up for there.
I see. You mentioned your co-founders all live in different part of the world. So how did you guys come up together then start to build cities?
Yeah, so the internet first. So we're eating our own dog food with respect to the thesis, and it'll
Yeah.
probably be those three cities that we will actually. So each city on the map on the app itself will be its own DAO, for lack of a better word. We may even call it a
Oh,
different name, but
yeah.
but it'll be an on-chain entity where I don't know if this will be the case, but like the multi-sig essentially kind of becomes the minimum viable city council in a way,
Mm,
right?
sure.
And but to answer your question directly, so I met Ronald in Lagos first. So after I read the white paper, he found us through after he just won a CityCoins hackathon. So CityCoins was the project that generated funds on stacks that was built on Bitcoin to essentially generate. I think they generated like $25 million for the city of Miami, and so it was a really cool project that kind of penetrated the public conversation about like, hey, crypto can fund like literally public goods, right? So it's very clear to me that he was like very vision aligned, and he won the hackathon. So just a great technical leader, and so met him first, and then met Nick. A funny story there. I was writing in the white paper. I wrote the word innovation collective, and I was like, I should look at that domain. Like, what is that? What's is that for sale? Like, what's the domain? And it turns out his org, that's the org he's kind of started with in Coeur d'Alene to kind of build this blueprint that we're working with. Is called Innovation Collective. So I
Oh, okay.
did a cold LinkedIn message, which I never do, and yeah, it was pretty immediate. The alignment that was like, wow, this is fascinating that you're literally doing what
Uh,
we're writing about, but like offline first. And so we just said, let's digitize this thing and let's go. So that's how we all met, and yeah, all the contributors as well have all come online first, and so it's a slower process. It's one to get used to, having only worked in places where we're all in the same place, but it's cool. It's fascinating.
that's cool. So I know Balaji mentioned cloud first, then physical
I
second.
think it's cloud first, land last, but not never. I think that's the thing. Yeah.
I know he's one of the investor for your project. So what's your relationship with the
Yeah.
networks?
Yeah, so I mean, it definitely crystallized a lot of things that I had kind of fragmented thoughts about. Like, I can't. So I know the network state. I think he came up with that several years ago. So I remember seeing it, and I
Mm,
remember. I think I started reading. Started getting into his stuff like about 6 months prior to writing the white paper. So there's definitely a lot of kind of thought filtration that a lot of his work really really inspired. So absolutely,
mm,
that was helpful. There's some things I think we'll probably take a little bit different approach from the book.
yeah.
Probably the main one I think, and Vitalik kind of covers this in his essay on what do I think about network states, and
Sure.
I totally understand the voice versus exit dichotomy, where people should have that freedom to have voice or exit in
Yeah.
any given environment, but I think there's kind of a third element, or I don't even know what to call it, or if it's called conviction, loyalty, or commitment or whatnot. But and I'm writing an article about this, so I'm going to
Oh,
clarify all these thoughts here. But like, I think we kind of are more on the element of like, hey, we need to have like the foundation of a network state still exists physically, right? Like, you still, any citizen of a network state, even if you're able to move around, still needs to be
mm,
in some jurisdiction or on land somewhere. So like that, so the emphasis on that, I think that's what we're prioritizing even more so, is like, hey, this needs to be a very localist focused ecosystem where
yeah.
we kind of operate in service of like the people who are like on ground in these cities that maybe have been there for years, if not decades, like building out their ecosystem. So, and Brad Feld even mentioned this in
Yeah.
Startup Community's book. He's like, if you want to build a startup ecosystem in a city, you have to be thinking on a 20-year time horizon, and that time horizon has to reset every day. Like, you're basically always thinking 20 years ahead. And to build those lasting ecosystems, yeah, I mean, it's a lot of time and effort, just like anything else. And that's not to say that it's not complementary with that vision. I think a lot of what he writes about is, kind of, as he mentions, kind of like a framework for thinking about things. But I think that's kind of, core part of our approach is like we want to really make sure that the people in on ground kind of like leading these ecosystems are very, have the majority of the kind of the local
Mm,
context and
sure.
and local commitment to the region.
Yeah. As the saying goes, Rome is not built in one day. So you need to have this long-term
Right.
thinking to, yeah, do something in a bigger scale.
Right.
Yeah. So when people claim for the city, this one of the criteria you check the city's chapter? These people need to be very localized and have make the commitment to stay there long enough.
Yeah, I think for the folks leading those ecosystems, and again, this isn't like saying like, oh, we don't want, like, it's not to say like we don't want, like we absolutely want that. We absolutely want people like floating through these ecosystems as
Yeah.
well, but
Mhm.
the leads should be like, the leads should be kind of the ones that are more permanently based. But you know like, I think all of us, especially who are, work in tech or just nomadic or whatnot, we've all helped
Mhm.
clients or ecosystems like in different parts that we've never lived or never have even visited, and that's totally possible today. But for the broader ecosystem, yeah, I think that's where that focus comes in. And so for the claiming city feature, yeah, that's right now kind of primarily an application process to just see, who's out there, who's on ground in these areas, and kind of surfacing, innovation-minded leaders in all of these areas and the cities they want to see. And what we'll probably do, what it's looking to shape up as, is we'll have the three. So the cities that will go kind of on chain first will be the three founder cities, and then essentially, so we'll set a precedent, and then those three will have the voting rights to basically bring on new ones on chain. And then as it grows, it'll just progressively get more
Sure.
decentralized, because once you have 1,000 cities voting on new ones, the original three are, much, they're just a smaller piece of that puzzle. So that seems right now to be kind of the most elegant solution that I think we're going to kind of go ahead and execute on.
So is there any city blueprint in real life you would like to follow?
Yes, it's probably the work that Nick's done in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. So
Uh-huh.
he's the real estate and community lead for the ecosystem. I'll send you the link after, and you
Yeah,
can post a
sure.
video. But it's very evident to see, and I having been there, it's very evident to me that, like, oh wow, like there's something really cool going on here.
Mhm.
And it doesn't even, like, the space feels amazing. They have like an underground bar and cigar lounge and
Ooh, sounds
co-working.
interesting.
Yeah, no, it's really cool. The co-working space. They have like this area for families, a coffee shop, all in the same building, and that's just the building. So the population itself, like, I think it's like a 30% engagement rate with that kind of ecosystem of the population. Coeur d'Alene has 2 times more startups per capita than the rest of Idaho. They
Wow.
have
Okay.
2 times nine-figure startups. They've passed a bill that actually recognizes, like, the rights of AI robots on public lands.
Wow, that's
Yeah,
cool.
and that's a lot of that's due to the work that he's done there. Is like,
Yeah.
it's kind of like getting people kind of rallying around an economic vertical that, and in that case, it happens to be AI robotics. They have a electric boat manufacturer, like the Tesla of boats, operating there on the lake. So yeah, so that's definitely the blueprint.
Wow. It's like already we're in the future after
Yeah.
listening to what you described. Wow. So it feels like only happening in sci-fi story, but now it's real.
Let's make it happen. Yeah,
Yeah.
the future is here. I mean, drawing out, like, there is a video that Elon posted a couple days ago, and it's definitely like a promotional video, kind of for SpaceX and Starbase and whatnot. But like, it's essentially almost a city there. Like, there was not much there before. they had, all the infrastructure there for launching rockets and whatnot. And now it's
Yeah.
kind of becoming its own, it's basically its own city, or the city definitely
Hmm.
revolves around that economic vertical, similar to how cities of the past kind of, they typically formed around some economic vertical, whether that be, just like in Silicon Valley, or commercial
Hmm.
fishing, name, on the, New England coast. And again, I apologize, I'm kind of just speaking from like US knowledge context, but since I see it, I'm just going to speak on that. But like, yeah, I mean, so many, you can draw that parallel for any given city, that they first formed around some economic vertical. Now, when it's all tech based and software based, like, what is that thing to rally around when you don't need to be tied to the land? And that's that looks different, right?
Sure. I'm very curious about your career path because you mentioned when we first met each other, you were served in the military. So, what that help you with building the project?
Sure. Yeah. So yeah, I commissioned into the army as an engineer officer, and it was like 2012
Hmm.
now, is when I started, and I did it for 4 years. And for so the engineer in the army branch, there's like 11 branches. So there's Navy, Army, Marines, Air Force, and then even in it within those, there's actually like a lot of different subdisciplines. So engineer was like one of 11 different subdisciplines. There's like artillery, infantry, aviation. Engineer is definitely the one that's is definitely the generalist branch. So like when there's a certain mission and they don't quite know who to like call on, they like we're the ones to kind of figure it out. It's definitely the best. I think it was just at the time just a really good decision for myself, and learned a ton. And I'm definitely a believer in kind of like public service. It was good. And I think professionally, what it taught me the most is how to just operate on and make decisions when you have incomplete data,
Hmm.
which translates really well to startups, I think, because you have incomplete data. Sometimes you have no data, and you're just kind of like, all right, we have to make a decision, though. We
Yeah.
have to keep moving forward. And so that's kind of what has resonated with me the most there. And then I've also just been always like very curious on like a very wide breadth of subjects. And so what I equated to that was like any given subject or interest in the world, somebody's building a business out of, which I just thought was just intellectually fascinating. So those are the two kind of like aspects or attributes from my own, I guess, professional trajectory that kind of, that have kind of like stuck with me, I think, or keep me driving forward.
I noticed that there are so many projects in the network state dashboard biology
Hmm.
listed and
Yeah.
include your one build city. So what other projects grabbed your attention? I know you were in a City Doll and Cabin Doll podcast before. Yeah, you guys talk about.
Yeah. I mean, they're all fascinating. I think, I take this analogy to like, if you look at the financial services stack, there's hundreds of players, right? Like there's hundreds of companies doing different APIs, different widgets, different, you know, credit cards, neobanks, the whole stack is huge. And so if we're considering the network state as like disrupting, you know, country APIs or the country stack, essentially, like there's going to be thousands of players, and they're all going to kind of take a different shape. And I think that's what's going to be kind of the most unique thing about it. So like, yeah, definitely, I totally understand the cabin DAO premise, and I think it definitely appeals to a certain audience. And I love nature. I love how you say, and I think that kind of like commitment to that kind of domain is really cool. City DAO is obviously pretty cool with they've actually bought the land in Wyoming. I like Kift. Kift is really cool. They have the I used to grow up going and doing a lot of with my family, we did a lot of actual van trips around Mexico and kind of like the Southwest United States because that's where I grew up, and so their model is pretty fascinating. And then yeah, Afropolitan. Yeah, I haven't had enough time to dig into each and every one. I kind of understand what Jur's trying to do, but I'm really interested to see what comes out there. But yeah, I mean, I think anybody that's on that dashboard or thinking about doing this kind of thing is yeah, I mean, it's definitely a frontier. It's definitely a frontier emerging industry. So they're all pretty fascinating, and they all kind of inspire a lot of our thinking. And I think we're all going to kind of learn from each other as we grow.
Yeah, last month I was in Italy. Then I met one of the early 1729 members, Gabriel.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
Oh
yeah,
yeah, from
yeah,
Praxis,
praxis.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah, I heard the pod. I was listening to the podcast earlier. Yeah, he's cool.
uh-huh.
So so you got to meet him?
Yeah, I met him in person in Milan. Yeah, we talk about
Nice, nice.
what the project he is involved with. Yeah, they also like purchase land, will do something in America. So I feel like at the moment it's still very American centered, like City Down, Cabin
Uh,
Down, and your
okay, yeah. I'm I think just very like global first. Like if there's so like we have the cities on the dashboard, we've let people claim them organically, like starting out, and probably just by nature of being here, like the majority of them were claimed in the U.S. first. But like if we see, we had a lot of early activity in Brisbane, and so it's like let's focus resources there. And of course our co-founder in Lagos, like that's one
Mm.
that we want to facilitate as much as possible. So they are, yeah. I think there is that slant, which is interesting to think about. But yeah, I don't know. What do you think? What do you think? Does that mean anything, or what do you think?
No, I mean it's I think it's a good thing because America is always like when I grew up, I heard about American Dream. It's like you always do the innovative things first. So I mean, it's a good example. If you set up the examples, then other places people can follow up later.
Yeah, as long as, yeah, I mean, as long as it's like, still very, like I think the best ideas come with like a lot of
Hmm.
cross pollination. So just like, yeah, I want to see as much again, like, because just like that analogy, like a founder shouldn't have to go to Silicon Valley to get funding. It's the same thing for jurisdictional barriers, where like a founder from Tanzania should not have to like go to the
Sure.
US and then go to Silicon Valley just to get their idea off the ground. Like all of these, like as long as it's getting, evenly, these opportunities are getting evenly distributed, I think that's the most important piece. And whether there's, a capital concentration in the US or, Singapore, like that's great. But as long as that's getting like pretty evenly distributed, I think that's what's exciting. And that, that introduces a whole slew of legal challenges and compliant, but I think, I think, I think crypto rails are the ways to kind of equalize that as best as possible.
Yeah, that's why I found it why Lisbon is so fascinated, gather so many international peoples here. So we'll
Yeah,
see what can come up.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
What's the biggest roadblock you think will prevent you from achieving what you want to achieve?
Oh gosh, that's a good one. Yeah. So, um, biggest roadblock. I mean, I definitely think about, not, I don't want to bring up the boring stuff, but I definitely think about legal a lot. Like, what does this look like to be able to operate legally and compliantly in as many countries as possible as soon as possible, and not break the bank and not have some kind of leverage against us. So so that one takes a lot of time to think about.
Mm.
Um, but but Yeah, I mean, I think I think that's going to be the biggest piece. I think there's a lot of de-risking that can be done there. There's a lot in the crypto industry that's like, okay, what do we have to do to kind of like, like appease, jurisdictions or governments,
Mm.
but it should be maybe potentially the opposite, where it's like, hey, there's an enormous brain trust here of just really smart people from all over the world ready to solve problems. Like, it should maybe look reverse. And I think you can even see that. You even see that more, and one of the reasons we're kind of focused on like maybe smaller cities is like a lot of those are more willing to experiment faster with and they're just kind of they're ready to try new things, and
Mm-hmm.
we've found that more. It's like, if you told me I want to do a pilot project for um, you know, uh, some kind of crypto initiative to fund infrastructure in a city, and you told me I had the choice between New York City and Coeur d'Alene, like I'm gonna go to Coeur d'Alene, like like or Reno or wherever, a smaller city, because I know you'd just be able to just move quicker and at least get yes no faster,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, as long as we're getting a yes no faster from a local municipality or jurisdiction, like that's fine, because then we at least know how to move on, and we're not wasting time trying to get all the buy-in that we would need from a New York or whatever to get something off the ground. So I think I foresee that being challenging as we go, which is why we're just focused on product first,
Yeah.
have that moat, get that off the ground, and then be an interesting
Mm-hmm.
interesting as we go. Yeah.
That's good. Yeah. Very looking forward to that.
Yeah, I hope yeah, we're gonna do our best to get it there. Just to get it, just to have those problems will be a
Yeah, yeah,
privilege.
exactly. So if people want to get involved, like if they are interested in build cities, how can they do it?
Yeah, so we have our website, buildcities.network or .com. They'll both go to the
Mhm.
same place. That's probably the first place, is to go there, launch the app, sign in with Discord and MetaMask. We're actually going to remove the MetaMask, so it'll just be Discord
Oh,
shortly.
okay.
But yeah, that's probably step one. Our social media, join build is Twitter,
Hmm.
join build underscore. But and then if you want to get involved, so that app serves any community already. So like that product is for you, for the audience, for everybody. And then if you want to get involved internally with like, so we have 9 guilds set up, one for governance, treasury, legal, offline development, and we have an internal Discord for that, and you can access that through the app as well, and get involved directly that way. And then there's a couple other things on the website that we kind of have some call outs for, but that's probably the first thing. Yeah.
Cool. Last question. Do you have any books and resources you can recommend if people very interested in startup cities concept?
Sure. Yeah. So I would definitely check out Startup Communities by Brad Feld. Just if they want to get
Hmm.
the kind of initial foundational thinking of what we're looking to tackle. Like, it covers a lot in there. And then as far as something that starts to go beyond that, obviously the network state's a good
Hmm.
read.
Have you finished?
I did. Yeah, I finished it,
Yeah,
and
great.
probably go back and check some notes there. But yeah, Startup Communities by Brad Felt's a great
Uh-huh.
book.
Yeah. And I heard Balaji is going to launch a V2 version of the network state, which
Oh,
will be a
oh
double
yeah,
size. Yeah. We're gonna have a lot of
yes,
work to do now. Yeah.
yes. We'll have to have as study group
Mhm.
and dissect it and put the pieces back together. So
Yeah.
it's fun. It's exciting times. We're in very very eccentric times. It's exciting. It's
I feel
go
they're
ahead.
so lucky to live in current moment to
Right.
witness all the changes.
Yeah,
It's so
it's
cool.
exciting, it's scary, it's
Uh-huh.
interesting, it's changing so fast, and
Yeah,
we'll just keep moving forward.
yeah,
Yeah,
keep building.
exactly.
Great. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Thank you, Camellia, and I look forward to meeting
Yeah,
again in
for
real life,
sure.
and we'll go out for seafood. Yeah.
Cool. Kia ora, Nihao, and hello. Welcome to the Chiwi Journal Podcast. I'm your host, Camellia Yang. My guest today is Angelo Alessio. He is the co-founder and protocol architect at buildcities.network, which allows anyone in Web3 to overlay their digital communities on top of existing cities. In today's episode, we talk about a startup city protocol Build Cities, the network state, startup cities ecosystem, and many more. I hope you enjoy the show. When we met in real life in Lisbon, you just launch your project,
Yeah.
like relaunch it, or how do you describe it? It's like, because it's already been there when I registered, but when we met each other in Lisbon, you did the public beta launch.
Right. Okay.